The latest deadly shooting by federal immigration agents is, of course, awful and tragic and horrifying to those who have watched it. And the media has been leaving out context that everyone should know. Context like the track record of the guy leading the immigration crackdown in Minneapolis, the guy who's been all over the media. There's nothing shocking about him saying things that are obviously not true. He's done that before. A federal judge called him out on it, saying that he admitted to lying in a deposition. But big media hasn't been telling you this. I'll explain coming up. There's nothing partisan about facts. Everyone should know when a person being presented to them in the media has an established track record of lying. But that's not the only context missing. There's also crucial context that some people on the left don't want to hear. The threats against these federal agents are real and can affect a split-second decision about whether to shoot. That does not mean that this man killed in Minneapolis, Alex Preddy, presented any kind of threat. Based on the videos of the scene, there's no sign that he did. But there are threats. We, the people, need a full understanding of what's going on, of all the forces contributing to this combustible, dangerous situation. In a recent episode, I told you how the media chooses to capitalize on your rage instead of doing the job of getting you the whole truth. The media has trained people to look for their anger to be reflected rather than looking for truth, facts plus context. We need sources we can trust to provide those, even when it isn't popular. We need this desperately, and we're not getting it. Meanwhile, the New York Times op-ed section proves yet again that no matter what's happening anywhere in the world, it will run pieces from its own people trying to link everything to Gaza, even this killing in Minneapolis. It's a pathetic one-track mind obsession that big media just can't quit. Also today, another crucial media story involving immigration. 60 Minutes aired the controversial report about a hellish prison in El Salvador. It's the report that big media were freaking out about when the new head of CBS News temporarily held it for further reporting. The media screamed that the sky was falling, basically. I haven't seen anyone point out what changed in the report when it aired. I went through the original leaked version and the one that was broadcast to tell you what's different. You'll hear why this may have been an important correction that was caught before it aired.
The administration invoked a centuries-old wartime power, the Alien Enemies Act, to rapidly deport some of the men.
What's even more telling is what did not change. This story airing proved that big media got their coverage wrong from the beginning. All that and more coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. My name is Josh Levs, L-E-V-S, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, where I became basically the lead on-air fact-checker. But throughout all that time, I always saw how much was wrong with the news industry itself. Back then, I couldn't fact-check the reporting, but now I can. We've got to fix a broken media ecosystem. At the top of the show, I always try to share a message from one of the latest supporters. Let's see, this one comes from Fairy Tales on Substack. She wrote, "Powerful reporting. I love the clear middle. It truly feels like you leave your personal politics at home. Everyone is out there fighting the message, but no one is challenging the messenger. Well done." I really appreciate that. She is in the paid subscriber tier on Substack, which is always the first place I look for topics, ideas, information, your feedback on this show. And speaking of it, the newsletter is an important accompaniment to this show. I don't expect you to take my word for anything. I put the newsletter out with lots of links and information for you. It's free, so you can sign up and get it, no charge. I also have additional content for paid subscribers. You can learn more about it there, and there are other ways to support this show too, which is necessary, and there are benefits to people who do, but I'll get to that later. Let's jump into this. I'm going to play you a clip from this latest shooting in Minneapolis. It's disturbing. Here goes. That is from one of the bystander videos when Alex Preddy was killed in Minneapolis. He was an ICU nurse, intensive care nurse, for the VA. He had been using his phone to take video of ICE agents. There's no sign in these bystander videos that he ever presented any kind of threat to them. He appeared to be taking video of them, including moments in which they shoved people. It seems that he tried to help someone get up after being shoved. It also seems clear that the agents went after him. A bunch surround him, and then there's this commotion around him, this melee. At one point, they seem to realize that he has a gun, which he owned legally and had a permit for, and there's no sign that he ever put it in his hand. One of the officers appears to have gotten the gun away from him, and then after that, another of the agents appears to have shot him. But then a video shows an agent afterward looking at his body, saying, "Where's the gun?" Apparently not knowing that another agent had gotten the gun away from him. So it's very possible that the one agent who shot didn't realize that the gun that he was not holding but was on his body had been taken away. It's all awful. Here is a little more from one of the bystander videos.
All he was doing was helping people park and get through safely. There was absolutely no danger to any of these agents.
These agents were with Border Patrol, which Trump has sent to Minneapolis as part of his immigration crackdown, even though Minneapolis is not on the border. Greg Bovino is director of Border Patrol. He held a news conference and claimed this.
During this operation, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol agents with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, a Border Patrol agent fired defensive shots.
Basically, all the media have been saying that the videos contradict this, that there's no sign he approached the agents. And that line about with a handgun leaves the impression that he had it in his hand. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem even said he was brandishing it, but based on all the videos, he clearly was not. This case is not like the previous shooting I told you about of someone else who opposed ICE in Minneapolis. That was Renee Good, who was in her car. She was killed. I talked about this a couple episodes back. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go back and check it out. There, it was very hard to tell, based on videos, exactly what happened. Here, in this case, there is an obvious and it seems clear difference between what Border Patrol is saying and what we can see in the bystander videos. These Border Patrol folks and DHS folks, they saw the same videos we did. They had every ability to look at it. But instead, as I record this, they have continued to just double down on their claims. The media has generally been calling this out, which is at least something, but they have not been telling you about the track record of lies from this guy, Greg Bovino. That is context. When they quote and play you clips from him, they should tell you about this from his background. A federal judge in Chicago wrote this in November. Quote, Bovino admitted in his deposition that he lied multiple times, unquote, about what happened there. To its credit, a local station in Minneapolis did report this in the wake of Bovino discussing this latest shooting. Here is Fox 9 Minneapolis St. Paul discussing that judge's ruling.
At one point, Bovino denied stepping past a barrier and tackling a protester to the ground, even as he was shown video of that very incident. This is what a federal judge said after Bovino testified under oath as part of a lawsuit. Quote, the court specifically finds his testimony not credible. Bovino appeared evasive, either providing, quote, cute responses or outright lying.
Big media, though, didn't mention it. I'm just one person, and I knew about this. Somehow, big media didn't bother to do basic research and look at previous reporting even to see that this information was out there. To me, there was one moment in particular that screamed for it. Bovino was on CNN the day after the shooting on their Sunday political talk show, State of the Union. The interview is basically political theater. It might be fun to watch him be asked about the video over and over, but at the end of it, you don't really have any new information. Anyway, at one point, there was this exchange.
From everything we have seen, law enforcement was assaulting him when he was there trying to help another individual.
Dana, law enforcement doesn't assault anyone. Follow directions of law enforcement. Follow directions of law enforcement in an active crime scene.
Law enforcement doesn't assault anyone? Of course it does sometimes. That's just a fact. I would have loved to see them ask him about his own track record and quote from the judge's ruling. That would be interesting and new to see how he responds to that. And it would add a layer of context to his claims now. By the way, if this was a Democratic administration, obviously right-wing media will be telling you all this. There's so much happening that's in reverse here. Alex Preddy had a concealed weapon, apparently a semi-automatic, which the right usually supports. But there's also context that some people on the left don't want to hear. And this context is also a crucial part of the story. When I searched on Sunday, I found tons of reports referencing Renee Good, the woman killed in Minneapolis. But I did not see any big media at that point mentioning another name, Sarah Beckstrom. She is the 20-year-old woman killed by an Afghan immigrant in Washington, D.C. She was part of Trump's immigration crackdown there. 24-year-old Andrew Wolf was also shot. He's recovering. And I also covered this in a previous episode. I'll put all the links for you in the show notes and the newsletter. This is crucial context. These federal agents face real dangers. And of course, that can and will weigh in on any split-second decision to shoot. In the midst of a moment like that, you hear that someone has a gun. You don't realize another agent has taken it away. You might see them move in a certain way. It can affect the calculus in your decision. Federal agents also face death threats. Some agents and their family members have been doxxed. And D.C. was not the only instance of violence aimed at agents. A listener sent me this from Dallas. This was back in September. A guy was apparently trying to kill ICE agents, but messed up and killed and wounded people who were in ICE custody. Here's a clip from a report by local station KDFW.
Joshua Yawn left behind handwritten notes saying he wanted to terrorize ICE employees and interfere with their work. No agents were hurt, but one person in ICE custody was killed. 2 other detainees critically wounded.
There's also a guy on YouTube named Ami Horowitz who makes these undercover videos in which he exposes support for deadly violence from people on the left. Just the other day, he went into a group of protesters in Minneapolis and found that they had no problem giving him financial donations to kill ICE agents.
We need to go after these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to hurt them. We need to kill them. I think we have to start killing people, man, frankly.
Right.
I think that's the only way for us to get the message across because, let's be honest, saying F you, they don't give a shit.
If we want to make this stop, then we need to see the full picture and address all of it. Every part of what's making people so afraid and angry. Even the parts we don't want to see, we need to. Our society is spiraling. The media should be unwinding that spiral and laying it out clearly so we can all look at it together. But because the media has failed to serve that role, people have turned elsewhere, generally to partisan media that tell them what they want to hear. Coming up, big media flipped out when CBS held a story for further reporting. Lots of so-called journalists insisted the story was killed and would never air because CBS wants to curry favor with the Trump administration. They said CBS was hiding the truth. Well, the story aired. I'll tell you what changed and what didn't. Do you remember the little engine that could? Let's talk about that for a second. The dangerous polarization taking over our society is being fueled by the media. And there's a reason for that. The market rewards it. These days, if you join a big lie of the right or the left, it's like you are put on a bullet train that speeds to numeric success. this show goes against the market. And so it is a much tougher, harder path to grow this show. We need your support to grow this movement for truth, to help fuel this train up the hill. Here are things you can do. Yes, you can become a paid subscriber to the newsletter. That's helpful. Also, there are free things you can do. Rate and review this show on the platforms, wherever you're listening to it now. Everyone who does that makes a huge difference because that's how those algorithms work. Tell individuals about this show. Contact someone you know and say, I think you specifically would find this episode interesting, and here's why. You can also sponsor episodes and tell sponsors about the episodes. You can find out all this information in the show notes and at my website, joshlevs.com. Let's root for truth so our society can come together. And let's prove to the market that you don't have to join a big lie to succeed. With your help, we can get there. Thank you. I told you previously about the uproar over 60 Minutes holding a story for further reporting. People who are supposed to be journalists flipped out, insisting that it was all a political move to appease Trump. I explained that there are legitimate questions about what happened behind the scenes. People should look into this and find out whether it was a political or corporate move. But these so-called journalists, including the head of a journalism ethics program, decided that they just magically knew exactly what happened, even though they didn't. Well, now that 60 Minutes story has aired. So, what happened with all those media outlets that had claimed the story was killed or spiked, which is another way of saying killed? The ones that were saying, oh, the CBS leadership won't let it air. What do they have to say now about their own false reporting? I've used the crickets sound effect before, so let's use something else. Here are tumbleweeds in the wind. What actually happened is that people in the mainstream media want to hate everything that happens at CBS now. I explained previously that the media has been calling the new owners of CBS Trump supporters, even though their records don't show that. And the newly installed head of CBS News is Barry Weiss, who has called out the illiberal thinking and anti-Semitism that has overtaken so many newsrooms. We have yet to see what will happen at CBS. Will things get better than they were in the past? We don't know. I hope CBS becomes a place that actually presents truth instead of platforming lies. I've reported on this show about all kinds of lies from the right and the left at CBS under its previous leadership. I reported how CBS took guidance from the Russian government on how to conduct an interview, which is so insane and so obviously against the most basic journalistic standards. But all these talking heads said nothing. They had no complaints about that. They surely would if it happened now. Anyway, the story that CBS News temporarily held for further reporting has now aired. I went looking for reports on what changed. There were articles about this, but I haven't found any that took the time to look and tell you. So I did. The report was about a notorious prison in El Salvador, known by its acronym CICAT. The Trump administration has deported people from other parts of Latin America up to this prison in El Salvador, including people who were not charged with crimes. By numerous accounts, including this one, this prison is hell on earth with torture and deprivation of basics. And it has been reported on elsewhere, so this is not entirely new information. Anyway, the original version that was going to air was leaked because it was mistakenly briefly released in Canada. Here is something that the reporter on the story, Sharon Alfonsi, said at the top in that original version, in the part of the report where they sit in the studio and speak to the camera. She explained that the Trump administration said that the folks it was sending there were part of a violent gang.
And invoked a centuries-old wartime power, saying it allowed them to deport some men immediately without due process. An unusual strategy that sparked an ongoing legal battle.
Okay, so she cited that centuries-old wartime power, and she said that the Trump administration said it would allow them to deport some men immediately without due process. Now, here is what Sharon Alfonsi says in the version that aired.
The administration invoked a centuries-old wartime power, the Alien Enemies Act, to rapidly deport some of the men.
That might not seem like a noticeable change if you weren't looking for it, but they no longer say that the Trump administration said it could deport some men immediately without due process. That is a significant change, and journalistically, no matter how anyone feels about this, that is an important change, and based on everything I can find, a good one. When it comes to fact-checking, you have to dig into details. In the original leaked version, what CBS said there seems to be inaccurate. It does not seem that the Trump administration is saying that it could deport people without due process. In fact, in the Trump administration's statements, they claim that the system that is set up with third parties, other countries, does allow for due process. Now, as awful and hellish a scenario as this may be, facts are still facts. If the Trump administration says that it provided due process, you can't say that the Trump administration said the opposite. I mean, obviously. Here's why this is so important. When Sharon Alfonsi, the reporter, was condemning CBS leadership for holding the story, and when all these people were rushing to agree with her without having any facts to work with, they all said, oh, this story was totally fact-checked in every way and was all set to go, so this is purely politics. But what if it wasn't? What if they had something wrong in the introduction to the report? So that seems to be an error that was fixed before it aired. Is the media acknowledging that? Picture big media newsrooms and tumbleweeds coursing through them. Okay, the introduction then added that CBS had made several attempts to interview key Trump administration officials on camera and that they declined that request. That's an important addition, too, that was not in the leaked version of the original, and it sets up the viewer to know what to expect and to know what will not be in this piece and why. It's also not a big deal and not unusual. You say stuff like that. You inform the viewer that the administration refused to participate that way. Okay, then this report, the packaged part with all the video mixed in and everything, ran, and it was not changed. I went through it twice, and I made a transcript of the leaked original version, and I downloaded CBS's transcript of the new version. There were no changes. All these people who were saying, oh, it's going to be destroyed, it won't air, it aired. Then, at the end of it, the reporter, Sharon Alfonsi, came back on screen. In the leaked version, that didn't happen. Here's a piece of it.
60 Minutes has repeatedly asked the Department of Homeland Security for the complete records and criminal backgrounds of all 252 Venezuelan men the U.S. sent to CECOT. It would not provide them. This past week, DHS told us we are confident in our law enforcement's intelligence, and we aren't going to share intelligence reports and undermine national security every time a gang member denies he is one. That would be insane.
So they give you more information about their efforts to get comment from the Trump administration. There's nothing harmful about this. There's nothing anti-journalistic about this. This piece ran just a couple of weeks after it was supposed to. Of course, no one is doing any mea culpas about the things they screamed about Barry Weiss or about CBS at the time. I told you about this one woman, Margaret Sullivan, who wrote this screed in The Guardian. She's in charge of an ethics center at Columbia Journalism School, and her piece was filled with ethical failures. She called Weiss a cog in the machine of authoritarian politics and said this was censorship. Lots of media had run with Alfonsi saying that there was a kill switch, even though the story was never killed. If CBS executives had wanted to kill this story, then why didn't they kill this story? Why did it run? Under the two-dimensional narrative that they were giving, they can't explain this. So, what are they doing instead? Well, they've just moved right on to other attacks on CBS. They're attacking anything they can. There's a new evening anchor there. His name is Tony DeCopel. I've reported on him here. He happens to be the only person in all of mainstream media who at least challenged a hate monger who put out this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel screed. But progressives love him and were up in arms that this guy had dared to challenge him, even gently. Big media figures decided to hate CBS's new leadership and Barry Weiss, so they use their platforms to go after CBS in every way they can. It's two-dimensional nonsense that leaves out reality. We need better. We all deserve better. As I record this, there are new developments. Trump has announced a shakeup for his leadership in the crackdown in Minneapolis. It seems the guy I was telling you about, Greg Bovino, is losing his leadership position there. Trump has announced that he's sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis. Homan is Trump's so-called border czar. I've reported on him in the past. He has his own long history of lying, of course. He used wildly wrong numbers about illegal immigrants. He falsely blamed illegal immigrants for all these fentanyl deaths and sex trafficking. If you didn't hear that episode, I'll put a link in the newsletter and show notes for you so you can scroll back and hear that one. So it's not like we should expect any more accuracy in the coming days from him. The Atlantic reported that Bovino has lost his position as commander of Border Patrol, but then the White House said that's not true. Who knows what will happen there? I'll keep an eye on it. The judge I was telling you about is Sarah L. Ellis of the Northern District of Illinois Eastern Division. She is probably going to become more of a national figure because she's now overseeing a lawsuit against the Trump administration. Illinois and the city of Chicago are suing the administration for what they're calling an illegal occupation of Chicago. That'll be interesting. The media will have no clue how to report on it because they don't know what an occupation is, as I explained in the first ever episode of this show. Meanwhile, something I mentioned earlier, over at the New York Times, their op-ed section is obsessed with one topic, hating Israel. It's wild how the editors of that section will run just about anything as long as it's telling people to hate Israel. The New York Times, sadly, is still considered the holy grail for op-eds in the sense that so many people want to be published there. The Times turns down the overwhelming majority of pieces that people pitch there. I have friends who have contracts with the New York Times. They are supposed to contribute op-eds throughout the year, and most of their pitches get turned down by the editors. But if you want to attack Israel and link that attack to whatever's happening in the news, they have room for you to do that. They did that for this crazy guy named Peter Beinart after the 2024 election in their Sunday paper, Prime Op-Ed Real Estate. So, in that sense, it's not shocking that their longtime opinion writer, Thomas Friedman, wrote this insane piece the other day comparing Minneapolis to Gaza. His column makes no sense. I'm not even going to waste your time breaking it down for you. Just know that is so the New York Times. And on Tuesday morning, so the day before this episode comes out, I scrolled through the main page of the Times website. Guess what was not there anywhere? Iran. Iran is currently the site of the most horrific mass killings on Earth, as far as anyone knows. Activist groups working hard to gather information about what the government's doing to protesters there are estimating that the death toll could top 30,000 already in very little time. As I mentioned last week, there are citizen journalists doing what they can to get information out despite a government blackout. There are reports of the Islamic Republic raping, torturing, and killing huge numbers of protesters and political prisoners. That would not be surprising. It would not be out of character. There is no limit to what Iran will do to its own people to crush this uprising and keep power. People taking to the streets know that and are brave. Now, obviously, that story won't be the top story in U.S. media every day. But keep this in mind. Hamas is a proxy of Iran. And throughout Gaza's entire war against Israel, big media took everything that Hamas said and made it headlines and top stories. They took images released by Iran's proxy, misrepresenting reality. And they made those the top images in the world, with big headlines above the fold at the tops of newspapers, front and center on websites, leading newscasts over and over, basically a daily drumbeat. I also looked at the New York Times physical paper for this past Sunday, since that is the most read issue. The only mention of Iran on the front page was in tiny print at the bottom, telling you that there's a story inside the paper. So that's the New York Times for you. Everyone rightly horrified by what's going on here, federal agents killing demonstrators, should know what's happening on an incomparably larger scale in Iran. If you know people in Iran or people from Iran, there's a good chance that they're feeling traumatized. Now could be a good time to reach out to them. To all of you listening who are from there, who have loved ones there, my thoughts are with you, of course. And speaking of thoughts, to all of you, I want to know what your thoughts are. Let me know. I love hearing from listeners. It means so much. There are two great ways to get in touch with me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. You'll see it's a really cool form. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.